Spitfire Audio's latest product from their Abbey Road Orchestra flagship line of sample libraries is out. So we're gonna check it out, see if it's worth your cash or if you should skip this one. Let's get started. So the latest library is Abbey Road Orchestra High Percussion. The first one, Low Percussion, I already reviewed on my channel. So go check that one out because there are a lot of features that are shared between the two that I won't really go into here. So check that out if you want to know about those. So what's the main difference between the two libraries? Low percussion is generally made up of low percussion instruments, but mostly things that are reminiscent of bass drums. So really, really large, deep sounding drums. High percussion is basically anything that isn't that. You have not only just drums, but auxiliary percussion instruments as well, and we'll get into what those instruments are and what they sound like. So full disclosure, Spitfire Audio did send me a copy of this library to test out and review on my channel, but they didn't tell me to say anything. They didn't pay me for this. They didn't set parameters for what the review could or couldn't mention. So these are just going to be my thoughts on the library as if I was trying to consider shelling out $450 for the library. So what loads up first when I pull up the Abbey Road Orchestra plugin is low percussion. That's because low percussion and high percussion share the same plugin. And it's my understanding that every new product in the line will share the Abbey Road Orchestra plugin. So you find everything housed within this one window. I'll just filter high percussion here and we have all of the instruments in the high percussion library. And there's a lot to go through. So I think of what a lot of low percussion's biggest strength was the breadth of instruments within that one category. Each library thus far is only a fourth of what the percussion family can offer. So let's do a brief overview. This isn't a walkthrough. There are other videos for that. This is just going to be maybe a tour through a couple of the sounds. I'll give you some more context on maybe the percussion instrument itself and the playing techniques because I myself am a percussionist, so I have that kind of unique perspective. So we've got bongos, congas, a darbuka, a djembe. Let's listen to some of the bongos. As you can see, we have two different ways of playing them, with the hands or with sticks. Both are very valid. Here's a few of the sounds with the hands. Here with some sticks. We have some congas. Great sounding instrument. The darbukas. Here we get the field drum. Love that one. Mini bongos. The piccolo snare. A different piccolo snare. Different flavor with that one. The snare drum. And all of the toys. So we've got castanets. In fact, we've got two different versions. We have handle castanets, which is a pair of castanets on the end of a little stick. And you just move them around like that and then they clack like this. And then a castanet machine, which is the two castanets, but on a little device that's sort of spring-loaded so that one of the castanets is up. When you hit it, it returns back because it's on a spring, if that makes any sense. So that's what that sounds like. We have claves. We have several different pitched claves. Two different kind of güiros. So we have a plastic one and a wooden one, which is actually great to have. Just like low percussion, high percussion is incredibly well recorded with a wealth of different mics that you can combine into different combinations to get a really, really great sound. And what I really have come to appreciate about both low percussion and high percussion is that because they're recorded at Abbey Road, they're so naturally adept at the orchestral sound and trying to get that sound for all these percussion instruments in that context. But because of the different kinds of mic positions, they're also very applicable and can be transformed slightly as if they were recorded in a studio. So you can use those close mics, the pop close mix to make it sound like it was recorded in a studio, like a small studio. And that is very useful in its own way because you get to use it in smaller contexts rather than trying to have a conga sound that's way the hell over there. You can get everything really up close if you need to. And I've been using it like that. More on that in a little bit. So for example, let me pull up the congas. And instead of mix 1, I'll turn that down and let's pull up the pop close mix. See what that feels like. Let's bring up these section overhead mics a little bit. See what that sounds like. You start to hear a lot of the early reflections. Let's turn it down. You still feel really close to the congas, but there's just a little bit more space there. So I love using this library like that. Now, let me give you a brief tour on what the congas have here. So let me turn off the two-handed layout and turn on a right-left mapping. So as we hover over on the bottom left of the plugin, you can see what each note is. Starting from the left, we have low tone left hand, low tone right hand, and low bass left, low right bass, mid tone left, right, mid bass, roll, mid. We also have a low roll, and then main tone, main bass, main roll, main palm, main closed slap, and main tip. Now, what the heck do all of those mean when it comes to congas? Well, firstly, there are 3 different congas that have been recorded. You typically will see a player with just 2. The main conga drum, which is called the quinto, and a lower conga drum, which is called the tumba. So you have the quinto, which is the higher pitched one, the main conga that you play with. And then the tumba is just for, to play the bombo notes. If you know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm talking about. But that's not used as much. The main drum is the quinto, the main conga drum. And that's what main is referring to in the left here. That's why this has more techniques in just this one drum than these 2 drums. So we have the low drum. The middle drum, which is slightly higher pitch, is not as large either. So each of those has a name. Altogether, they make congas. So what about all these different tones, basically? So I wish I had a conga here to show you, but a tone is basically just a regular hit where you don't leave your hand on the drum to mute it. It's nice and resonant. So here's the tone that's been recorded here on the main conga drum. Classic conga sound. The bass hit utilizes pretty much the entire hand, but you hit from like the tip of your fingers in the center all the way to the edge of the drum. So here's what this bass sounds. It doesn't ring out as much as the main tone. We also have a roll that's been conveniently recorded. Just going back and forth on not on the very edge of the drum, but close to it. We have palm. Now a palm hit is just literally you have your palm like this, leave it on the drum. Palm of the hand. Above that, we have a slap. A slap is little more difficult to describe how to get it, but basically if you hit it a certain way, you'll get a higher pitched sound come out of the drum and it gives you a slap. Classic sound of a conga. And then here we have tip. Now a tip is basically if you have your palm on the drum like this, if you don't lift your entire hand off of the drum, but do come down with the tips of your fingers, that's a tip. All of these are used in combination to play a typical rhythm like this. There I was using a combination of the palm, the tip, the slap, and the regular tone. That's a very, very common way to play the conga drums. And if you don't know that, then you're probably just going to be flying blind when it comes to recording something like this. You don't necessarily need to know that in order to play this instrument, but that's the kind of detail that the Abbey Road Orchestra series seems to be having so far, is that if you know these instruments really well, they've been recorded that way. Does that make sense? So you can use the other drums in combination. Let me play something. My keyboard is over here, by the way, so that's why I keep moving. So that's a quick rhythm utilizing two drums, very common in traditional conga playing. Let's check out another instrument, like how about piccolo snare A. So this is the first version of this. Firstly, we have several ways to play it, with the snares on, the snares off, or with brushes and the snares on. Or we can have them all in one laid out across the keyboard. Let's stick with snares on though. Hovering over, let's see what we got. Rim shot, rim hit, center hit, edge hit, drag, center, drag, edge, rough, center, rough, edge. And let's pull up a closer mix. Why don't we just pull up the pop close mix like earlier. Okay, so this is interesting to listen to. Firstly, what everything is. So a center hit, you hit in the center of the drum. That's what this sound is. If you move to the edge of the drum, not on the rim, but just on the head still, but towards the edge, you get this kind of sound. It has more sustain to it if you can pick that up. That's just what happens on a drum. Rim, so you're just hitting the metal ring around the drum, holding it in place. Holding the head in place anyway. And a shot. A shot is when you hit the rim and the head at the same time with the stick. Classic sound. And then we have these two techniques here, a drag and a rough. What's that? A drag is, I think it's kind of difficult to explain. Let me just show you. Okay, so I've got a practice pad out and a pair of sticks just to show you a couple of these things. If you've ever heard of a flam before, a flam is a classic rudiment on the drum where there are basically two notes that you hear. One smaller, softer sounding one, and a louder main one, like this. So I have one stick low and one stick high, and they both come down at the same time. You hear two notes. A drag is when you play, instead of just one note as your little note, you play two, like this. Were you able to hear the difference? Here's a flam. Here's a drag. A rough is, instead of playing two, you play three, like this. So you hear 1, 2, 3, and then your main note. Here's a flam. Here's a drag, here's a rough. So they're useful in their own ways because a flam is a great ornament to have. But a drag can make it sound maybe a little longer. And a rough makes it even more ornamented. So that's the difference between all of those. Now what's been recorded here in the plugin is the drag and the rough, but they're incomplete. So the drag, what's been recorded is only this, not the principal note, which is what you need to complete the drag. And then the rough, in fact, it even sounds not like how I play a rough. There are different ways to play everything, but I play a rough going right, left, left to play the 3 small notes. That's something I can do consistently. But what's been recorded and what it sounds like is this. So 3 notes, but it sounds like it's one hand bouncing, going loudest to softest. That's what it sounds like, which to me feels a little odd. One, that it would be played like that. And also that it's incomplete, that we don't hear the principal note. I'd rather just hit a button or hit a key on the keyboard and hear, rather than just the 3 notes by themselves. I also wish that a flam was recorded, because there's one soft note and one loud note. And I would argue that flams are probably more important to have than the roughs are. But those are just my thoughts. I really am curious what their thinking was with this and what they prioritized having or what they didn't. So anyway, back to the computer. Let me just show you each of those things again, how they've been recorded here in Abbey Road. Here's the drag. We hear just 2 notes, both in the center and at the edge. You hear how it sounds loud and then it gets softer with each one. It sounds like it's just one hand, but it's bouncing on the drum. And then you have to complete it with a separate hit. If you don't know about that stuff, again, just like the conga, it's sort of so detailed that if you don't know how to do it, you're kind of left in the dark. Again, not that that's a bad thing. I love how deep they're going into this. And that's the point of these libraries, is that they're so detailed, not only in just how they're recorded, but in also how the player is playing each of these instruments, because they get to package this product in a way that's very niche in terms of its market. Firstly, this isn't intended to be your first percussion library, not by a long shot. This goes very deep in one particular part of the instrument family. Even with all of the high percussion instruments that are in here, there's no tambourine, there's no triangle, there's nothing like that. I assume because there's an Abbey Road Orchestra metallic percussion library coming soon, and that'll have everything that's made of metal in the orchestra, like cymbals or triangles like I mentioned, or ribbon crashers perhaps, and anything that's made of metal that you hit or something like that. I assume that that's what's coming soon, if not next, which, knowing that, kind of makes you ponder where you should invest your money in depending on what you need. So what I mean by that is I find a lot of value in the high percussion library for 2 reasons. One, each of these instruments is ultra focused in doing the instrument very, very well, recording it very, very well. It's malleable in an orchestral context or in a studio context in terms of miking. And also because I'm a percussionist myself, I have played these instruments before. I know how to play them, if you can even, make that kind of claim for anything really. But that's what it's like. So if you feel like you're in the same sort of boat, then go for the library. But I think for most people, this is less of a worthwhile investment than the low percussion is, because low percussion had a great array of different kinds of drums that you don't find often in other libraries, especially recorded as well as they are here. And this is incredibly recorded, but there's no instruments that are missing that I wish were in here. For example, the shekere. I wish there was a shekere sound that was recorded just like these have been recorded. A kabasa. There's shakers, there's a kashishi. I wish there was a kabasa as well as the shekere. But those two are, I think, common enough that I'm surprised to not see them in here. I think there are other libraries that you should have in your arsenal before you have this one, until maybe you find the need that you need this kind of detail. Regarding that, let me show you what I've been making with this library lately. So let me open up something that I've been working on. This is a project that I can't really tell you about yet, but high percussion I've been able to use in all these ways that I keep mentioning is its greatest strength, which is its detail. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so check this out. I've been working on this project that I can't really talk about yet, but I used in this little section basically nothing but a high percussion library. I have a surdo that I use from the low percussion library, as well as these claps that I recorded myself. But let me show you all of these things in context, and then I'll mute the other instruments and let you hear just what high percussion is doing. Now, let me show you what's just high percussion. Here I have, on most of the instruments, I have the pop close mix all the way up with a little bit of the section overhead mic. This is also in my template, so it's running through a reverb and running through a compressor. So this isn't what it sounds like out of the box. This is, slightly altered to fit my needs and what I need it for. But it sounds to me like they're real players that are playing these instruments. And I played each one of these parts in. I have a bit of a delay, so I made sure to quantize everything, but I did play everything, and it sounds super dynamic. There's so many velocity layers that have been recorded for each of these. And this is in stark contrast to BBC Symphony Orchestra, which is the other big library that I own. There are a bunch of percussion instruments included in that, which is super convenient. A couple of snare drums, a bass drum, several of the toys, but none of them are as detailed as each of these instruments here in Abbey Road Percussion. Maybe let me show you what I'm doing here. So the kashishi, basically I'm just doing a little throw. So when you're holding a kashishi, you throw it like this, and the seeds basically hit the edge, and that's what you're hearing there. With the congas, I have a bunch of the different sounds. So to start off with, I'm playing with the low conga, and then it goes to the main conga once we get going in the arrangement. As well as with the timbales, I'm starting off with the shell of the timbales, which is a common way to play the drum. You hit the shell of the instrument, which is typically made of metal, and that's a super common way to play it. And that's what you hear at the beginning, going back and forth between the higher timbale and the lower timbale. It's so fantastic. So for this, I'm grateful that I have the library, because I wouldn't have been able to pull this off. I would have had to maybe borrow these instruments from someone else and bring them here and record them myself. But if you have need for this kind of detail in a library, and you can not only afford it, but also get value out of it, that's the only way that I would justify this kind of library. I am getting value out of it because I get to use it in this kind of context, and because there are enough of these Latin instruments that I'm using, it's very appropriate for the project that I'm working on right now. So it's an advantage for me. Basically, low percussion and high percussion, these instruments are replacing the BBC Symphony percussion instruments that I have, only because they sound so much better. And the way that you can play them is so much better to do than just the sort of shallower detail, I suppose, that there is in BBC Symphony, which is sort of the trade-off here. Abbey Road Orchestra is hyper focused on one particular section of the orchestra, and it does it super, super well. Again, I wish there were a few more instruments in here. Maybe that'll come in future updates. Maybe not. I wish there was a shekere. I wish there was a kabasa. But I do look forward to the maybe metallic percussion library that I would have to assume is coming, and also a tuned percussion library. Although that is a lot of money in just the percussion section alone. So I can't imagine what they're planning on doing for the rest of the orchestra. So I'm going to end the video there. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll try my best to answer down below. I know that I didn't cover everything, but ask me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So until next time, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Ernesto Composer. You can visit my Patreon at patreon.com/Ernesto Composer, where you can get access to templates, score study versions of my own published works, score study Sunday hangouts every single month, and more goodies. You can visit my website at ernestocomposer.com. Thanks so very much for watching, and as always, take care.